Welcome to Zoah Christian Church. We're so glad that you could join us on this special homecoming Sunday. It's great to see the faces out there. My name is Brian Drum, and if you don't know me, I'm the minister here. And if I can help you in any way, please don't hesitate to catch me and let me know how I can help you. But I just want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank everyone, all the people in Zoah that made this possible, from decorating to food to the preparation for the worship service, to everybody that's been involved. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to keep the announcements brief this morning so we can get on to the important things. Hopefully you on your way in, and you'll find information there about upcoming events. You can also go to zoachristianchurch.org or our Facebook page, and you can find out what's going on there and stay informed that way. I just want to mention a couple homecoming specific things. There is a meal after church. You are all invited. There will be plenty of food. If you didn't bring anything, that's okay. We still want you to come and join us and enjoy. So that is going to be taking place after the service. Our offering today is going to be going towards the building fund, and you can also find information about online giving if you weren't prepared to give. It's in the bulletin. I just want to let you know that today's offering is going to go towards the building fund to help us pay on this building we're in. So you take advantage of the photo opportunity out there if you want to, for in between service and the meal. If you want to go and get some pictures to kind of remember this occasion, I encourage you to do that. And speaking of photos, there's a slideshow playing, and it's also going to be playing during the meal. Pictures that people have submitted from years past, a lot of them some really old pictures, some current pictures. And if you missed it coming in, it's going to be playing during the meal, and it's also going to be available. We have some copies already made, and we can make some more copies. So for a donation of any amount, it doesn't matter. If you want one of those DVDs, we can give that to you. At the end of service today, if you guys would all just be a little patient, we're going to end our service with a group photo. We're going to try to clear the stage a little bit and get everybody gathered up here and take a picture real quick, and then we'll dismiss to the dinner. So just so you know, put that on your radar. All right. So in your bulletin, you also should have a copy of our prayer needs. So keep those people in your prayers as well. And if you had something you'd like to add to our prayer list, there's a tear-off section. On the end of that prayer list, there's a section that you can tear off and give us your prayer request. We'd love to be praying for you. And on the other side of that tear off is a visitor card. If you're visiting us, we'd love to hear from you, to get your information so we know who you are, and we can appreciate your visit today. So those prayer lists and the visitor card can be turned into the offering plate as well when it's passed later on in the service. I'd like to open this up in prayer, and then we'll get started. Father God, thank you so much for your many mercies, your blessings, Lord. We thank you for gathering us all here today to celebrate this special occasion. As we prepare to worship you, Lord, we give you the focus. We give you the glory. We're here not just because of not because Zoah has done, but because of what you have done through these years. We give you the glory, and we just praise you. Let's lift your name up this morning. In the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Let's stand together and begin our time of worship.
Wonderful God, our even
We come at this time of service to celebrate what Christ has done for us. To gather around this table to remember His blood poured out for us. As we are here this specific day to celebrate what God has done through Zoah over the past 166 years, we can see that He's been faithful. That blood poured out, His body broken for us, is what we're here to celebrate this morning. We can say with confidence, He is great.
Homecoming service, it's a time to celebrate, to look back in the past and celebrate, like Jeff had mentioned, 166 years as a church. Just looking back, so our 6th anniversary in this building, but 166 years. And in your bulletin, you'll find a little sheet that talks about the history of, if you want to refer to that. But what that sheet doesn't talk about, it talks about dates and names, but it doesn't talk about there are souls in heaven as a result of the gospel that was proclaimed in this building. There are people throughout those 166 years that have become better husbands, better wives, better parents, better Christians because of God working through the men and the women that make up our history here. So we celebrate today, we celebrate the past of Zoah, but we also celebrate the present. We look around and we see people that you've chosen to gather here because either you're a part of Zoah or you're connected to somebody, or at some point in your life, this place has meant something to you, or to somebody who has meant something to you. And so we just look at the present, we celebrate that we're still here. We're still doing what we can to praise God, to build His kingdom, to make a difference in the present. And we also look, hopefully, to the future for many, many years of serving God and serving this community. Just anticipating how God is going to use Zoah Christian Church in many exciting ways in the years to come. But right now, in these next moments, we gather around the Lord's table. And we celebrate something even more important than all of that. Celebrate what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us. But similar to this homecoming celebration, the Lord's Supper has there's elements of the past, the present, and the future in these emblems. In Luke 22, it says that Jesus took bread and He gave thanks and He broke it. And He said to His disciples, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Communion is a time of remembrance. We reflect back on the sacrifice that Jesus made, that horrible, horrific death on the cross for my sins, for your sins. With the bread, we remember His broken body, and with the blood, with the juice, we remember His blood that was shed. So communion is a part of the legacy of the church. For the very first church, with the first followers of Jesus in the first century, they gathered together and they took bread and the juice to remember, and we continue to remember. But there's also an element of the present at the Lord's Supper. Corinthians tells us in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 27, "So that whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. Everyone ought to examine themselves before they eat the bread and drink from the cup." So here in the present, we're told to examine ourselves, to examine our attitudes and examine our heart, prepare ourselves for this bread and this juice. As we reflect on the past, we also examine our present. So I encourage you to take a few moments before you partake to search your heart. See what God may want to address in you as you prepare your heart in the present. So communion is a time of remembrance and it's a time of reflection, but we also hopefully look into the future. In Matthew's version of the Lord's Supper, Jesus says, "I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it anew with you in the Father's Father's kingdom. So through the cross, our sins are forgiven. And we can receive God's grace, we receive eternal life. We have hope for the future. Christ died, he was buried, he rose from the dead, he ascended to heaven, and he is returning in all his glory. And we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So as we partake in this communion time together, we remember the past. We examine the present. We anticipate our future in Christ. Would you pray? Oh God, I just pray that you would bless this bread and this juice as we partake it. We remember the sacrifice that was made. We reflect on what that means to us. Just bless this time as we share together as brothers and sisters, as your children around your table. In your son's name.
continue our thanks to the Lord. The privilege of being on your table. We thank you for each one that came into this building this morning to participate in this special service. We just thank you for all your blessings, Father. We ask now to get us to this table, that you bless the fund of this service, and you bless the message, and you just bless the day, Heavenly Father. Fathers, we come now to take up these times and offerings. We pray that you'll bless the gift and the giving. We pray that it will be used by this much over, Father. Father, we Lord, remember to thank you for the 166 years that you blessed our church. We ask you to continue to bless us. In your son's name we pray and ask these things. Amen.
introduce our speaker today, and many of you probably know him better, certainly know him longer, but it's my job, you can't have it. All right. George Ross comes to us today from Northside Christian Church in New Albany, where he served as senior pastor for 18 years and has recently transitioned to the role of teaching pastor. He is from Scottsburg, he and his wife, and many of you know him from, like I said, know him from his time at Scottsburg, and he and his wife, Sue Lynn, will be celebrating 42 years of marriage at the end of this year, New Year's Eve. So, Tabitha's in the nursery, but if you're listening, oh, there you are. So there's hope for us still. All right? So we can serve all ministry and marriage both together. They have 2 grown children and 5 grandkids. Their daughter, Rachel, is the founder and executive director of Forget Me Not Ministries in Romania, and their son Nathan is the lead pastor at Northside Christian Church, so he gets to serve alongside his son. And I like when I asked him for his bio, I like it, because I found out more about his kids than I did him, because I can kind of relate to that. When the people class how I'm doing, I immediately want to start talking about my kids. So that's kind of the official. So now we'll get to the personal. In December, middle of December last year, I received this text from this man named George Ross from some church down there somewhere. All right, now, I was new to the area, and he had got my name and number from Jeff McCreary, our worship leader, and I'd only been here in Scottsburg and at Zoah for about 3 months or so. So I was new to the area. A big transition, moving your family to a new area, challenging. But we'd done it before a couple times, but it was still challenging. But it was also my first year, my first position as senior minister. I've been coming from 20 plus years of youth ministry here as senior minister for the first time, and that's obviously a transition I've never done before. And very challenging, and I continue to learn. But George became, and he continues to be, a great resource for me as I've transitioned into this role. And even though we've known each other only about 8 months or so, he's been a tremendous encouragement and a support to me. And I don't know if I've phrased it exactly like this to let him know, but he was an answer to prayer for me because I needed somebody like that. I look forward to continuing our friendship and far into the future. And I look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Here we go. I think we got a lot. Honored to be here with Brian, and he has certainly become a friend. And I can tell him after, it was actually 43 years ago that I moved to Scott County. 43. How many like me feel old as dirt right now? Oh boy, I sure do. But the greatest thing God ever did for me was allow me to come down to Scottsburg and be a minister at the church for one reason only, to marry into this bunch out here. Okay, my wife Sue Lynn. I wish she could be here. She's recovering from our daughter's benefit last night. We got about a dozen relatives in her home, and she's making sure they're all taken care of. But we had that last night. She'd want to wish everybody a great Lord's Day and blessing and that type of thing to the folks here at Zoah. It is a great blessing to be able to be with you today. And as Brian said, 166 years, my goodness. I just signed up for Medicare, and I turned 65 next month. So I'm beginning to understand what the 60s, I thought I knew what the 60s were all about, but now I see what the other set of 60s are like. But boy, it's great to see you. I can't see a person without having a moment to think, wait a second, I think that's who that is, but I have a memory. And that's the way it is to be able to have memories and encouragement and be able to celebrate what God has done and what He has brought us through. Now, I know when you think of homecoming, you think of how many might get a chance to be able to come back and be part of the fellowship that might have moved away. And that's always a fun type of thing. I grew up with homecomings in our church, a little church in Illinois, a little town about 800. We hit maybe 75, might crack 100 on Easter, maybe on that. So it's good for me to be able to see everybody is mostly awake out here. Nudge your neighbor, say just checking, okay? We'll try to keep everybody, that's why we give free coffee, Jeff, at our place. Keep everybody awake during the sermon, But it is a great blessing to be able to be with you and encourage you, celebrate with you on this day. A lot of times when you think of homecoming, you think of, the neat homecomings that are in the Bible, and you think about, Noah coming back after the flood and coming back to a dry earth for a moment on Mount Ararat. And think, This is the good feeling of the boat's not rocking anymore. You look at the New Testament, see some of the stories that Jesus told, like the prodigal son. And that moment of when the son comes home, who had wandered off, and you see the picture of the loving father who runs out to meet him and to welcome him home. There is such a message of welcoming home all throughout the Bible. If you look at Genesis and you see how there's a welcoming into life for Adam and Eve, and then when sin comes about, there's yet a welcoming back, and God always giving people an opportunity to be welcomed back. And that's what I hope today will be a great feeling of we're all in God's family together. Amen. Let me get another amen. We're all in God's family together. Amen. We really are. And to have that celebration, to have that moment to realize that that's what He's done in our hearts and lives. But every time, and it's almost like as Brian was going through the communion meditation, I thought, wait a second, he stole most of my sermon there, because that's what homecoming is really about. It's to be able to look back and to say, what has God done? To honestly acknowledge what's He doing right now, and then prayerfully commit ourselves to the future. To say, what do we want Him to do in us and through us for the rest of the time that we have life on this earth. It is what I might call a Psalm 139 moment where David says, search me, O God, and know my heart, and test my thoughts, and help me know what you're doing in my heart and life. And I believe there is a moment like this that I just want to encourage you in today, to realize that there are always 3 churches in every church. Now, most of the time we just think there's one, but there really is the church that we were, the church that we are, and the church God wants us to become. So I want to ask you for a moment to think about that. And again, I reflect back. I've been involved in, apart from the church I grew up in, 6 different churches. Brian mentioned he knows the transitional blues that you go through and getting to know new people in that area. And beginning to say, God, what are you going to do in me and use me in this way? I have a great memory of the history of Zoah long before I ever had met you. My 3rd-year Greek professor at Bible College at Lincoln Christian College in Illinois was Marion Henderson. Now, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Marion Henderson. Anybody? Oh, okay. Three hands that hold on there. Marion Henderson, tremendous fellow, great Greek professor, taught me a whole lot. Tried to teach me more than I learned, but he did the best he could. For as much as I could pay attention, he was incredible. But he preached here back in the 50s. In the 50s. I was born in 54, so about that time. He's here making a difference in your life and the life of this community and the leaders and those who were kids who grow to be parents, grow to be grandparents and great-grandparents, while I'm waiting to grow up over there so he can teach me more about the Greek language which the New Testament is written in. I used to play ball in college about 50 pounds ago. More than that, Danny, if I'm being honest, okay? At least 50. A long time ago, I met Danny back in they used to call it the skin knee tournament. It was a skin head tournament, let me tell you. They beat you up pretty much down at Beechwood Park. But I remember back at that time, I can't remember where I was on that. Why did I go there? Okay, I'm having that senior moment. But back in the day, Marion Henderson was a phenomenal teacher. But here it is. I knew I'd circle back enough in time. There was a fellow who kept the books for us on the basketball team. Kept score. Bob Wilson. Bob and Patsy Wilson. Anybody remember Bob and Patsy? Same 5 people, okay? That's good. Now, I need a few more on that. But Bob and Patsy were ministers here at Zoah back in that time. And at any time a few of us would get a chance, we'd have to go in a van and a car to go to a away ball game. You know, the team would lie down up there and load up. And I would holler, hey, Mr. Wilson, because I grew up with Dennis Cementis, and that's what Dennis Cementis always would say. And that meant, hey, Mr. Wilson, always called him that. Can we kind of ride with you and hang out? Because he was a whole lot of fun. And he would tell stories, just as Marion Henderson, a professor, would tell stories about a place I had never heard of and never thought I'd ever get to be. And so, Scottsburg, Indiana. You have a great reputation. You have a great heritage. You have a lot of things that God has done years ago that you need to be thankful for. And you know that. You don't have to tell you anything like that. I just want to cheer you on because I came from a small church. And at one point, we had a dozen of us off in Bible college at one time. God had done something in the life of my home church long ago. He'd done something that has historically been built upon in the life of Zoah that is a great thing. I got to know Brian Johnson, who grew up here. My kids had, Dave Johnson. My kids had Brian Johnson as a professor. Okay, Brian was just a kid in 6th grade who would come with his friend Sharisa Souter and some others who came to church to crash our hay rides, okay, at the church in town. Oh, Brian's here. We must be having a good time. What's planned, all right? And he got down in Tom Cartwright. What a great kid. What a great singer. He'd come on in for the same hayride, and some activity we'd have where we'd encourage one another from the Zoah church and the Christian church in there. I've met a guy because my dad is now at Hickory Creek in the nursing home in Scottsburg. Long story, he's 95, but we really now need to be able to have him pretty close to me. 5-hour drive, but we've got him here. And it's a difficult thing because for he and his wife, they both, Joyce, bless her heart, struggle with some issues health-wise, and I kind of got to keep a closer eye on him, so I'm burning up 31 left and right. And I met a guy named Ricky Moldero, and Ricky, I think, used to be here a long time ago when he was a kid growing up. I call him Ricky Bobby because of Talladega Nights. Anybody see that, Ricky? Okay. So I just come up, not too many people in a nursing home you can come up to and say, shake and bake, and they know what you mean, you know. He's a good kid. But we're talking with him the other day, and he's kind of the social director and chaplain, and great heart, great faith. And he has definitely been influenced by the love and fellowship of Zoah. Now, I've found that it's so important for us, if we're going to look to the future, we have to look back. If you've ever been in a swing out on the porch, you got to push back before you can swing forward. You got to see where you've been before you can go into the future. And I've asked, I'm going to have a couple of songs. Jeff will know well from our time. When I don't know how to end a song, I pick up the guitar and think, okay, we'll get out of it this way. Today, I have to start and end with one just a little bit. But I've asked Nancy Smite to come up and sing a song. And this is a song that is very dear to me and our family. And I asked Nancy years ago, I bet it was almost 40 years ago. Yeah, at least that, wasn't it? We had just gotten a brand new sound system at the church in town. And it had big speakers, one over there and one over there. And I knew everybody's going to be upset unless it was nice and gentle and quiet, you know. And didn't want any of those unnecessary elder speakers. You know, that happens all the time. All the time. So I asked Nancy if she wouldn't mind on a Sunday night, one of the few times they turned me loose, you know, once a month, to be able to sing this song. Let me see if I got the right key here. Is that pretty close? Oh, I mean, his name I love. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't remember what key we were in now. Turn to your neighbor and say, he has not aged gracefully. There we go.
Is a name I love to hear. I love to sing its word. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth.
Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me.
It tells me of a Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of his precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea.
Oh, Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because He first loved me.
It tells of one whose loving heart can feel my deepest woe, who in sorrow bears a part that none can bear before.
Sing along with us if you know it. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because He first loved me. Amen. Thank you. And the reason I asked you to do that, number one, I love the song. Number two, my wife sang that song to our kids growing up, all the time. Now she sings it to our grandkids. When they won't go to sleep, we put on Alan Jackson of Boyfriend of Heaven Jesus, and that knocks them plumb out. It's just a good old hymn does that. But my point from the past is we have to sing songs about God to our kids. We got to tell them, we got to teach them, we got to love them. They need to have melodies in their ears and their heart. Now, it'll be different songs, okay? It'll be different songs that they'll learn and different motions. They're not going to be doing deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. You know, although that was a fun song where I'm wrapped up, I'm tied up, I'm tangled up in Jesus. One of my favorites that got me through 10 years of children's church, okay, in town. But we do need to pour those things in to let them know. Let me read a passage from Revelation. Because there's this gentle reminder that Jesus gives to John in the Revelation, in that early part of chapter 2, about the church at Ephesus. He says, I know all the things you do. I've seen your hard work, your patient endurance. I know you don't tolerate evil people. You've examined the claims of those who say they're apostles and they're not. You've discovered they're liars. You've patiently suffered for me without quitting. In other words, Jesus is saying to the Ephesus church, you've been faithful doctrinally. You've stood for the truth. The same way my hometown church did in Illinois, the same way Zoah has as well. But he then moves to, like every honest evaluation, here's a moment of truth. He says, but I have this complaint against you. You don't love me or each other as you did at first, from the New Living Translation. Look how far you've fallen. Turn back to me. Do the works you did at first. If you don't repent, I'll come and remove your lampstand from its place among the churches. But this is in your favor. You hate the evil deeds of the Nicolaitans, which is a terrible group, just as I do. You can always count on Jesus giving us honest feedback and letting us know what really matters. And he was telling to the church at Ephesus, much like he might be telling us today. If there's a hole in our resume, if there's a gap within our life and our faith and our behavior, it might be that we need to return back and look back to see what is it maybe that we need to recapture from the past. Not everything. Oh no. Because all the methods are really different. The principles are the same, but the methods will always be just a little bit different. We live in a social media world. We live in a very technological time. I'm doing good on a laptop to get a sermon in and out of one of those things. So I don't tap in nearly as much as I should or could. An iPhone, a smartphone, I can only imagine how intelligent I would have been if I'd have gone to the library as much as I go to Google. But I didn't. So there's something about understanding the new era we're in. But Jesus says, don't forget what we used to do well. And he tells them the thing that maybe they had missed was a loving relationship with him and a loving relationship with one another. Do you remember when Jesus said, they will know you belong to me by the love you have for each other? I always thought Jesus meant to say, no, the way you love me, people will know. No, he says it's the way to love one another. And in every church, every life, every time I've ever been a part of, when we are hitting on all those cylinders and taking the time, and most of the time, it's just the time we fail to take, to know and to love one another, to listen to one another, to remember a couple of names, to invite a friend here or there, and let the love that God has for us spill over to one another. So as you look back today into the past and see some pictures and have some memories, always know that God is always going to be taking the love from the past that we've had and hopefully have today and moving that right now into our heart and life. Now that moves us to where we are now. There's a wonderful history here of Zoah, a wonderful reputation. A lot of ministry has flown from the people who live here through the years. But now we come to who we are now. And that's why the Psalm 139 where David says, "Search me, O God, test my heart, test my thoughts, expose who I am. Let me know exactly where we are right now." I remember the first time at a shopping mall, Green Tree Mall. I remember I seeing the first time this sign that says, "You are here." Okay? How many of through the years needed to be told where you were because you didn't really know? I need to be reminded, okay, now wait a second, where exactly? Put me on the east end of Louisville and it still gets a little, now how do I get on and off of 264? Wait a second, where do I go that to get to Oxmoor? I can't quite remember. And sometimes we can get disoriented in our life and we need to understand where we are. And today I want to affirm you as a faithful church, much in the way that Jesus affirmed the church in Philadelphia. And in Revelation chapter 3, he goes on and he gives this little bit of reflection and a little bit of encouragement and motivation to be the people we're called to be. And he tells them in chapter 3, verse 7, he says, "Write this letter to the angel of the church in Philadelphia." It was the smallest of the 7 churches that got a little evaluation. "This is the message from the one who's holy and true, the one who has the key of David. What he opens, no one can close, and what he closes, no one can open." He says, "I know all the things you do, and I have opened a door for you that no one can close. You have a little strength, yet you have obeyed my word and did not deny me." He goes on and says, "I'm proud of you guys." Philadelphia was the smallest of the 7 churches that are the only ones that didn't get chewed out. Jesus did not say anything like, you better, you oughta. He just simply said, way to go. And I want to encourage you today here as you live out your faith and your fellowship in this new time to make sure that you keep a good close account within relationships that you have. To understand that the identity that you have right now, God is using you. I really appreciate Brian. Isn't he a good guy? Humble heart, and boy, he can pack it away at Five Guys, so don't let him fool you. And I just appreciate his heart because he's thankful to be here. And I realize that any time of a new ministry, it becomes this opportunity as a family bonds, as the church comes together. There's always a challenge here, there. It's always going to happen. I've had plenty in every church I've ever been in. That's the nature of the kingdom of God in the body of Christ. But to see vision and to have a fresh moment and realize a good heart and good teaching. I've known Jeff I wish I'd have known him when I was here before, when he was at Austin. He got out about 78, was it? 79. He was in high school at the time. And I was over here. I knew Tom Franklin, but I didn't know a lot of other people in Austin. And Andy Watts, everybody knows Andy Watts, I think. But it's been a tremendous blessing. He's led worship for us a ton of times through the years at Northside. And I would step out and say, during the time that he was a critical part of helping us through that, was a time that his heart of gentle restoration and respect for the holiness of God, it led our people. It drew our hearts together. To look at this facility, I hadn't got to see it till now. I've seen the other one quite a few times. And you propped it up as good as you could for a long time. That was great stewardship. Great stewardship. It really was. But when the time came and the cloud moved and God said, over here, you were willing to make that sacrifice to do that. That's vision. That's heart. That's courage. That's sacrifice. But it's also a commitment, a spiritual commitment to the future. That's who you are. You have good elders. You have great leaders. I had a chance to talk with them a few years ago and share one of the most spiritual moments that you possibly can with a dozen of Lon's donuts. Great spiritual moment. Hear their hearts, encourage them. And that's what I love to do, is just encourage one another in the body of Christ. But I want to ask you to think about your identity of who you are. Because too many times in the life of every church, if all of a sudden we have an agenda and somebody's got one and somebody else has one, and I think we ought to, and I think we ought to, and I think we used to, the next thing you know, you wind up just the Tower of Babel all over, okay? I've seen it so many times, and I don't think that's here at all. I'm just warning and encouraging and loving you as a brother to say, don't ever let that happen. Make sure that the only purpose we have is to see lost people come to faith in Jesus Christ. And to see saved people equipped and encouraged and challenged to bring their family and bring their friends. Let me detour just for a moment from the notes, okay? One of my favorite and one of my most scary stories in the Bible is in Luke chapter 16. Jesus tells, it's a parable about the rich man and Lazarus. Not to be confused with Lazarus, Mary, Martha, friend of Jesus. This is a parable, all right? He just had a common name. And the rich man, very stingy, dies and doesn't go to heaven. He goes somewhere else to the place of torment. And Lazarus, a pretty faithful guy, never had much, goes and he dies to what's called Abraham's bosom in the King James language, all right? The abode of the dead, and he's hanging out there. And all of a sudden, you see what happens, and Jesus tells this story. And he says, here's what happened. The rich man doesn't go to any heavenly reward, but he can see what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the rich man who's in torment says, hey, I know that guy up there. I know Lazarus. He used to come around and beg around our house. I never gave him anything, but why don't you tell him to bring a bucket of water down here, because it's hot. And Abraham says, no, big chasm, big divide, nobody crosses over. And then he says something that would define every person of all time. He says, then would you go send him to tell my brothers about this place so they won't come here? The first words out of our mouth in eternity, I'm speculating, would be tell my family. Somebody if every person who's gone on out of this life could speak, heaven or hell, would say, tell my family, tell my family, tell my family. Tell my family about the goodness of God, and the grace and the mercy and the love. On the downside, tell my family so they won't miss out on what I'm missing out for eternity. And I have found in the life of every church I've been in, that somehow we can capture that and begin to tell families. Begin to tell our friends. Begin to let them know what the goodness of God is, what the will of God is, and all the things that He wants to have happen in our life. Tell them that truth. And realize that's the church that we, number 3, need to become. What kind of church will we be? See, right now, for me sliding out and our son Nathan diving in with both feet, I'm so proud of him, so thankful. Proud of our daughter Rachel and her ministry in Romania. We're heading over there to see her for a couple of weeks next month. But what can we do to help people become what God wants them to become, and to listen to Him wholeheartedly, and to follow Him with all that they have within their heart and mind? God pulled Cain aside in the early days. He saw he was angry with his brother Abel, and Abel just had offered the best he had. And Cain offered a little bit of grain, some of the leftovers, and didn't really get what God deserved it. And all of a sudden, God pulls Cain aside. He says, Cain, you need to know, you need to understand. Sin is crouching at your door, but you've got to get a handle on it, or it will get a handle on you. The Bible doesn't say anything about Cain saying, okay, I know, I got to get over this. Help me do that, God. Things would have looked a lot different if he would have been coachable, but he wasn't. That talk didn't turn out so well of what he became. Samuel and Saul had a conversation or two of Saul's heart in the Old Testament becoming fully devoted to God, but he would rather listen to make everybody else happy. Later on in the book of Revelation, we won't take time to read it, but later in chapter 3, Jesus talks to the church at Laodicea. And I bet some of you can remember what he said, because it's kind of a famous saying. He says, I know your works, they're neither hot nor cold, they are lukewarm. Now, I've always wondered, why did he choose that word? But if you understand a little bit more about the history of Laodicea, you find out that what they had was, it was this city down here, kind of like Hot Springs, Arkansas. They got the mineral water coming up, and it's hot and bubbly. God's kind of a hot tub right there, and all the minerals that you soak in from that is going to bring about a lot of healing. They understood the health and the healing of hot, bubbly water. But they also were surrounded by mountains, and they understood when the snow melts, it comes down. And there's nothing like a cold drink of water from a stream coming down from freshly melted water off the snowy mountain. But it all came together in this reservoir, the hot from the bottom and the cold from the top. And by the time it came together at the Lake Laodicea, it was lukewarm. Jesus said, because you're not hot, not cold, you're lukewarm. He said, I'll spit you out on the mountains. You won't be ingested into me because you don't want to become like me. For every church, we have to take that moment and say, God, who are you calling us to become? Because we want to be passionate, we want to be faithful, we want to take the next steps. And not just the next step or two, but the next flight of stairs. We want to make sure we do all that we can do to be faithful to you. Who will you become? The 7 years I was here, 76 to 83, changed my life. I always teach my kids that if John Lee, the preacher at Scottsburg, wouldn't have taken a chance on me, you kids would look a lot different, you know. And never would have met Sue Lynn. And the blessing of that, but I began to learn from a church. I'm so thankful for that time. Some basic things in the kingdom of God. And then I moved to Illinois for 5 years, and I learned a whole different thing. And my identity begins to change, and my passion begins to change and shift around a little bit. And I begin to learn some other things. Then I come back down to South End of Louisville, and 2.5 years down in the Southwest End at Kenwood Heights, and I realized, okay, this is a whole different kind of culture in the South End of Louisville. Just because you know Southern Indiana doesn't mean you know Louisville. So I considered it a mission trip for 2 years, and I never learned the language. I had to learn how do you lead in the midst of that. It's one thing to preach, it's another thing to live your life out, but how do you lead other people? And that might be what God's telling us here to do at Zoah. How do we begin to lead our family, lead our friends? After that, we went to Bloomington, Indiana, and learned a whole different thing from a church that was about 1,000. And I've never been in anything that big, and I thought, whoa, here's how this works. And boy, there's a lot more to this machinery than I ever thought. And then all of a sudden, God led our family out to Las Vegas, of all places. Of all places. We had no intention ever doing that. Nobody in their right mind would go out there, you know. But we were out there for 6 years. And our family's perspective changed drastically about how everybody is far from God or close to God. And we had conversations with people. I'll never forget the first gal that Sue Lynn worked with. Her name was Frankie. We baptized her in our hot tub in the backyard. And I remember realizing, how about that? There's so many folks that really just need to hear the message of God. Need to be given a few extra steps. What do I need to do to follow Him? Need to come to church a time or two. Need to hear the gospel. Need to feel the love of God. And our journey as a family began to change. I'll never forget, after a year being in Las Vegas, I had to catch a ride home with somebody else. We were down to one car, and so Lynn had that, and I just remember, all right, I got to catch a ride. Well, they're not there right now. And I just sat after our 4 services on a weekend. And I remember just being a little homesick, but also realizing I think I'm here, and I think I'm supposed to learn something. And tearing up to realize there are far more many lost people than I've ever been around. We weren't 5 minutes away from talking to somebody that their life was falling apart. And then I began to realize that's pretty much everybody. We just hide it real well in the Midwest, don't we? Everybody thinks that Las Vegas is Sin City. You know, it's no more sinful than any other place. It's just well lit out there. Okay? It's a county fair out of control. Is what it is. And we began to realize it's okay to be comfortable to have conversations with people who are far away from God. But I'd grown up in the church. Camper of the Week, George Ross reporting. I'd been time at Wonder Valley. I mean, I'm a kid who went to church camp and never came home. Just never came home. But I began to realize you got to have other conversations. Now, I want to tell you a story about my dad, and apologize to the guys at the men's meeting who will have to hear it again. But it's one of my favorite stories of my dad. He said 95. Dad had a tremendous work ethic, still kind of does. He's a little crippled, can't get around too good, but oh goodness, 25 years ago, he was wanting to, at our whole little church, he's wanting to kind of get some dirt out of the way, borrowed a buddy's bobcat, a little earth mover, you know, just hoping to get about 5 or 6 more parking spaces at the little church we were at. He was a farmer. So he's doing that, and a buddy of ours, Raymond Rich, one of the deacons, he went over to check on my dad, just see how he's doing, and he saw him over there. Oh, I know what Elton's up to, he's doing that. And he walked over, he said something was wrong. He was going side to side, he couldn't quite keep it straight. And he was either having trouble with the machinery or something. And he told me the story. He said, I walked up to your dad, George, and I kind of knocked on the little cabin, pulled it open. He said, hey, Elton, you okay? He said, your dad turned around to me, and he was having a stroke, and he had already drawn off on the side. His face was already drawn at the side. And he told him, he said, Elton, you're having a stroke. Get out of there. He said, true story. Your dad looked at me and said, I know, but I'm almost done. I cannot compete with that work ethic. Okay? Tremendous work ethic, you know. Still has that. Just keep on, keep on, keep on. But when my mom passed away in 77, suddenly, my dad's been widowed twice, married, and he's been through a few things. World War II, Battle of the Bulge, all those things. When my mom died, Mom could light up a room and she would do most of the talking. Dad was there, leader of the church, but he didn't get to do much talking with Mom. Okay? Didn't need to. But with her absence, all of a sudden he began to feel that after she was gone. 7 years before he remarried. So here's my dad, and he goes around and almost knocks on every door in this little town, Palmyra, Illinois, inviting people to church because he realized I need to be more verbal than I really was. I was there, but I need to say something because something from our household is not being said. And he started doing that. Went to one family, the Turner family, Marvin and Sandy, their 2 daughters, Kim and Tracy. And Sandy and the girls started coming to church, but Marvin didn't really come to church. And he was really glad that he wanted to bring Marvin to church, get him talking into it sometime. And we talked on the phone every Sunday afternoon just for 10 minutes or so. And he'd say, I don't think I'm going to get Marvin to come to church, George. I said, well, what's Marvin like? He said, well, Sandy's here all the time, and the girls, they're all plugged in, everything's fine. He said, but Marvin, I said, well, what's he do, Dad? He said, well, he plays a lot of golf. I don't play golf. I said, well, what else does he do? Well, he rides a Harley. I've never been on a motorcycle. Well, what else would you like to do? He said, well, he throws a few back, all right? I said, I got news, Dad. Marvin ain't coming to church. You know? That ain't going to happen, probably. I said, but you know, if you find something that he likes to do, maybe talk about it a little bit more. And the next Sunday, he called me and told me what had happened. See, what had happened, he found out that Marvin collected belt buckles. So he went to the Illinois State Fair, bought a belt buckle thought he'd give it to Marvin, invite him to church. And he goes up on Saturday to Marvin Sandy's and just knocks on the door real big. And he says, hey, Marvin. Hey, I just want to let you know we got a potluck. You got a guest speaker. It's going to be really good this Sunday morning. I know Sandy and the girls are going to come. And he said, and actually, Marvin, I found out that you collect belt buckles. And when I saw this at the State Fair, I had to buy it for you. And I wanted to invite you to church as I give you this belt buckle. Now, to this day, my dad swears he thought it was a Canadian maple leaf. True story. At that point, Marvin, who hadn't cracked a smile yet, falls on the floor laughing and can't get his breath. My dad had given Marvin a marijuana plant belt buckle saying, "Come to Palmyra Christian Church." Things you will never hear in the Billy Graham School of Evangelism. You'll never hear that. But he did. But I'll never forget the quiver in his voice when I talked to him the next Saturday. He didn't tell me all of that at all. He's still ashamed of it. I thought it was a Canadian. Still. But when he told me, guess who came to church this Sunday? Now, about 10 years ago, I bet, I was speaking there in my hometown, and flew Sunday night to Wednesday night. And on Wednesday night, Marvin was there. He came on up. He's in church. He's right there. He came on up to me and said, "Hey, I understand you've been telling stories. just the good ones, Marvin. Just the good ones, buddy." He said, "Well, if you're going to tell the story, you ought to have a belt." Now, my family has very few heirlooms. Okay? This is one. The kids will fight over this, you know, just what it represents. And isn't that the just craziest thing? Just the silliest thing. Now, the reason I tell that, most times I kind of come and have a one time to talk, is because you can't mess this up. You cannot do this wrong. You could not do anything further from giving a godly, holy message of an invitation than to say, "Let's light one up," you know? But he did, because he wanted to see his friend in a relationship that was a little closer to God. And I want to ask you today, where is that relationship? Where is that passion? As we think about the church we're going to become, will we become more and more caring and passionate about our family and friends? Or will we be content to let them find God some other way? See, it all goes back to what kind of songs are we singing. Are we singing to our kids? Are we singing, "Oh, how I love Jesus"? Because one day, they'll sing to us. One day, they'll remind us when we get there that the truth of God. Now, I've asked our granddaughter, Lily, to come on up with me. We'll find a good microphone. You stay there. I'll be over here. Or I'll get you in there. Come on. And you can see everybody, right? Now we're good and scared, right? I'm just kidding. I asked Lily to do this because my whole point is we need to sing to our kids, but someday our kids need to sing to us. And we'll see. You go right there. Sing that with us if you would. Just stay, let's sing it again. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like God, it's our prayer today that you would give us the heart, the words, the conviction to become the church, your people that you want us to be. The songs that were sung years ago would continue on in the truth in our heart of, oh, how we love you. But I pray that this next generation coming up, they'll be able to sing the amazing grace, the truth in your word, the love of your Son. Father, I ask your blessing on the church here in Zoah, that you would be with them in a mighty way. May we encourage one another at every step of the way, every generation. In Jesus' name, amen. I think right now is a time of invitation, Jeff, and everybody's going to talk. And I just encourage you to let God speak to your heart, not just in this moment, but in the moments to come, in the days to come. In the next 166 hours, or weeks or months, or years, or whatever God is.
I invite you guys to stand if you're able and sing with us. And if there's a position that's kind of laid on the front, we invite you to.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountains I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. And through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Imagine so great a mercy, what heart could fathom such boundless grace? That the God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has broken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. And hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation.
Thank you guys for being here. Before I close this in prayer, just kind of a brief, around my mic, I'm going to talk a lot. All right, for some brief instructions, I'm going to close this in prayer. I'm going to ask if Brian and John and John, if some of you guys can help me clear out these pictures and the things that are standing on. We're going to clear this out really quick and try to make this picture. We're going to gather up. We can go on the stage, on the steps, on the ground, and get ready to take a picture. We're going to smile pretty, and then we're going to eat some great food. And so to speed that process along, just ask for a little bit of patience, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to bless the food now when I pray to close this out. And that way, because knowing me, I won't forget, and all the craziness that's about to follow. I won't forget to bless the food. So I'm going to do that now. But thank you for being here. Please stay and eat this morning. George, thank you so much for being here today. Would you guys bow for me? Father God, thank you so much for being our God, for loving us so much, and for the privilege it is just to you've left your mission in our hands, Lord. We are the ones to go and build your kingdom, to go to our family, go to our friends, and tell them of the living hope. Tell them of the love of our Savior. You've given us that responsibility, that privilege, Lord. Let's pray that we would be able to go out and to do that. Like George said, you can't mess it up. You can't mess it up, you just got to do it. Let's pray that you would just bless this church as we move forward. And just give us a passion for the lost, a passion for and more the people that you want us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.